Welcome to Over the Curb, the podcast dedicated to empowering truck dealerships and remarketing professionals. Hosted by Ethan Nadolson, a seasoned expert in inventory management, marketing, and used truck sales, and the CEO of SOAR. Tune in as we talk shop with industry leaders, dive into the challenges and opportunities of remarketing, and explore how to maximize your inventory's potential and get your trucks off the lot and over the curb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Over the Curb. Today we have Larry MacDonald with Bitadoo. He's a strategic accounts, covers strategic accounts at Bitadoo. And today we're going to talk a lot about not falling in love with your inventory, okay? And some strategies, especially when it comes to auction. Larry and I are both truck geeks, so the producers both warned us to try and stay on topic here a little bit today because, man, we can really get going, can't we, Larry?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we want to make sure that the direction goes perfectly straight. So we could wander off into certain areas, but let's try and keep it on point.
Yeah, it'll probably happen.
Yeah.
But so Larry, you've been in the truck market, in the trucking industry, a long time, just like I have, and seen a lot of things. So I really appreciate you coming on today. And I hope the viewers and listeners to this podcast get a lot out of our conversation today around how to utilize auctions. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is we had Chris Visser on from JD Power on our last episode, and he really talked about the truck market and directions that we're heading and some of the things that are going to impact the market. But now the question is, okay, so how do dealers react to that with inventory that they have on the ground and just the challenges that come with a shifting market and some of the other things that we talked about on the last show. So, Larry, can you give a little bit of maybe a background about yourself,
Sure.
and then we can jump into some other topics here.
Well, first, let me give you, and let me first say, thank you very much for having me. I think it's important. We have been in a climate, obviously, as you know, that has been very difficult on the dealership side, whether it be trucks, whether it be machinery, whether it be any kind of tool or instrument. But it's been a challenging time, and obviously living in the dealership world, we've gone through these cycles before. So I think we did, especially for the new professionals that are in it. Sometimes they, what's happening? Well, if you remember 2018, if you remember 2008, we all kind of new emissions rules, regulations. We kind of all have been through a couple of these cycles. Just to give you a little background history, very heavy in the full service lease game. Started my career with Rollins Truck Leasing, and then moved from Atlanta, Georgia, out to Seattle, Washington, to run the Western Peterbilt dealership out there. And we went from 11 locations went from 3 locations to 11 locations. Awfully fun. I was there for probably about 10 plus years. And then I was offered to go down to Northern California, which is a good little story in itself. It was the very first Peterbilt dealer ever established in the United States. So there was a lot of history behind that, and spent about 12 years with them, and grew from 3 to 7 locations in Northern California, which is a completely different environment, as we know. Especially with CARB and emissions regulations. So, but I think one of the most fun roles that I had was right after that. I was recruited by Caterpillar Inc. And as we all know, Caterpillar exited the on-highway truck engine market back in 2007 when everybody started going vertical with their own engines and their own components, which was fun for me because I had been in the dealership world, and our mission or task, if you will, was to go and try and turn Cat dealerships into truck dealerships.
Yeah.
And with that comes a lot. And I think that's really where we met at the very beginning. That's where it becomes based on the industry. What is your knowledge? What are the different revenue streams that a dealership possesses? And obviously one of them that we heavily concentrate on based on market share and based on competitive was we were getting into a very saturated market. However, had a fantastic name, and but we had
Cool
to
looking
teach it
truck too. I have to
very.
say. Very
It
cool
was.
looking truck.
It was, and it really kind of brought me back to the beginning of probably how a lot of these guys really started, because I think a lot of it was trial and error. So with that, I'm very excited about what we're doing here at Bitadoo. Almost believe that, and if I can say it, I feel like we're a 15-year-old startup, because what we're doing really is changing the game. Granted, we talk about auction, and auction, as you know, coming from the truck world, kind of that, I don't want to say dirty word, but it has a connotation that it's a piece of equipment that's been sitting in the back that you're taking the weed eater and you're cutting around it, and it's been sitting there forever,
A
and the
dumping
engine's
ground
blown.
for
A
problem
dumping,
pieces or something like that, for sure. Yeah. There's
absolutely.
some thinking around that. But so to you and to me, an auction is very much not that. It's more of a tool for the dealership that can be used on different sides of the purchase even, right? And that's
Correct. And I
yep.
think what we're doing is we're establishing basically a new culture of what that looked like, from a pre-owned piece of equipment to a company that's looking at expanding. Are we an auction house? Yes, we're an auction house. Are we retailing and are we wholesaling? Absolutely, 100%. We kind of take a look here at Bitadoo, and just to give you a little background insight, it started about 20 years ago with two brothers called John and Howard Hawk, and they started basically finding equipment, selling a lot of stuff on the eBay platform, and they found kind of a niche in the machine side of the business relative to skid steers, small excavators, small items, and kind of saw the future of, I think, where we're going. And I think you and I have had this conversation.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I just think it's fun you're bringing up eBay, because I think eBay was one of the big reasons that we got SOAR and Bitadoo got kind of pushed together. I think more rapidly because SOAR is partner with eBay, and we work with
Correct.
them on their eBay Motors side for more, not necessarily auction business, but more the lead generation side. And Bitadoo is over here serving very much the auction side, and utilizing that platform. And they were kind of like, oh, hey, let's get these guys talking and see what happens. And I think great things are happening. So I appreciate you bringing that up for sure.
No, I think it's very important, because I think you and I think basically, even though we've known each other for a while, we really, and I think, like you said, we came together a little bit quickly, because really we are two eBay partners. And it to me, based on the systems that you own and offer, and the variety of products that you own and offer, dealers around the country, it's a nice closed-in loop to me, where, and you tell me if this is correct, but I'm sure you have dealers that come to you that you're managing their inventory, and they're always looking for new ways to How do I dispose of this? How can I get it featured? Do I need to put it up on eBay for lead generation? Ethan, what do you think?
Yeah.
So is that fair to say?
Well, I think there's actually multiple things that our dealers are coming to us for. Number one is using our appraisal app and looking at inventory before they even purchase it and trying to put prices on it. And you offer a service where you guys will literally put a price on that of what you think it will go for auction, but you'll also put a price on it that you would purchase it for, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah.
And we have several different programs. And again, I'd like to say that we are becoming more of an extension to a dealership as opposed to, let's just say, like you said, a dumping ground or final last resort, where a lot of dealers don't participate in used equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, at one of the dealers that we were in, is we really didn't participate in the used truck business. How we participated in the used truck business was through our lease account. We manufactured good used pieces of equipment that we knew where it came from, who had it, how many miles, was it serviced. So we use that really as our, and I think there are several dealers out there that do very similar, manufacture their own good used equipment, or they know who it's coming from.
Yeah, and you're talking about lease maintained and everything, so you know the history, and then you can take that asset once it comes off of out of the lease fleet, and then slide it straight over into a used truck sale, whether that's at auction, wholesale, retail, 3 disposition routes.
Correct.
Whichever one makes sense for either that asset or for the business unit themselves, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's interesting probably to a lot of people out there. And I understand, there's seasoned used truck managers that will understand this, but then there's also some good refreshers here, and maybe some new ways for certain people to think about this, and some younger people in the industry, because you and I both talked about, we've seen a big shift in the in even the age of people that are coming into the industry. We've got a lot more of these younger generations coming in, and some of the old guard sliding out, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this podcast, is to get that information out to everybody, so it's general knowledge and things that you and I take for granted probably a lot of times, to say, oh, hey, I'm going to be getting a package of trucks in, and what do I do with them? And the thinking that you have to take all of those in on trade is not true, and that you have to understand exactly what the pricing is. And especially when you're starting to talk about off-brand equipment, just like you were talking about with Caterpillar, trying to teach them, how do you take in a different brand and sell it when you don't know anything about it, especially such a fresh audience as that, because they didn't really know the truck market. They were equipment guys that you're trying to turn into truck people, right?
Correct. And and I think that's really where I saw a lot of shift, was when that was going on, which gave me a lot of thought to, where is this going from a used truck perspective? We all know that technology is changing. We all know that it's coming fast, it's furious. Bidadoo, and all we do, has turned more into a technology company, where we provide a service relative to your needs. And let's just talk about a package. You're right. You're 100% correct. You don't have to take that whole package. Maybe certain, and that's where we come into play, because we're agile enough to do what the customer needs us to do. If they want to participate in the package, they only want several pieces that they like, they want to offload some of the other pieces, we could be a very viable solution for the dealership, where they don't feel like they have to put a lot of cash out, or they feel like, if they don't take this whole package,
Absolutely. Yep, I understand exactly what you're saying. So they can split up a package, and there's several reasons to do that,
Correct.
Larry. And I know you know these, but I'm just going to articulate a couple of them. Number one, if the package, man, you just can't absorb that many into your own market, and you're going to saturate your market, therefore hurting the price of your uh, availability to sell that equipment. That's going to be an issue. Number one. Number two would be if you just can't even financially take in that number. Maybe you're on a floor plan or a limited budget or something like that, where you can pull in some of those units, but the rest of them you can offload. Would be another great use case for that. I don't know. You may have some more. I can probably think of some other reasons to do that. Off-brand equipment, I think, would be the other one, like we already discussed. Like, hey, at one point in time I worked for a Kenworth dealership, and boy, it was difficult for us to take in other makes and models because people would come to us for Kenworth or PACCAR product, really.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
what do we do with these trucks? And,
Well, and I think you're 100% correct, because we've also seen, as we all know, we've got a lot of overaged inventory in the system right now. We've got a very small backlog relative to the OEM side. We're coming back down to pre-pandemic levels, where a lot of customers went out, purchased equipment at a very high market rate. And unfortunately, freight was, as we know, pandemic, freight was up, supply chain problems, people overpaid for equipment. Unfortunately, that has settled down. It's definitely coming down. And we're seeing now more of, like I said, we're seeing more of a level set of where the market really is. And what it has led to is basically overaged inventory that is hit. Not necessarily all used. There's some new inventory that's sitting out there that's been aged. So I think it's coming down to the norms as we speak.
I think, one of the issues, kind of going back to our theme, is don't fall in love with these trucks, right? It's, my father always told me, you've got these, you take a trade or you buy a truck in lieu of taking cash, right? So you've got an asset sitting on your lot that's just a pile of cash, and you're watching it get, the dollars, you're just taking dollars off of it month after month between floor plan, depreciation, and other factors, lot rot. I wrote a whole article about this recently that I think, you and I discussed before I published it. Even.
Sure.
And there's a lot of reasons, right? And that cash, you're just watching that cash dwindle when you should be moving that asset and getting something back in that you can either make a profit on or put into a trade or something else where it's not costing you money.
Well, one of the things, and we call within the industry frozen capital, because that's basically what it is. You've got a used capital asset that is sitting there, not like fine wine, doesn't get better. There's always a new one coming down the road. And I'll never forget, I had a dealer principal one time. He said, Larry, never fall in love with your equipment, because there's always another one coming down the road.
Yeah.
So I always live by that. And when we talk about inventories, and we talk about, there are certain words that we talk within the industry: absorption, clearance, and there's for dealers out there that are either just getting into it, or they're starting to discussing some of the pitfalls of having a used truck department, or some of the luxuries of having a used truck department. There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of moving pieces. And like you said, interest rates now have creeped up. So flooring plans have gotten more expensive. You're seeing curtailments start to come back down, and you're seeing prices level out, and you're seeing dealers that are looking for alternatives to move iron. And I think we, and especially as partners, I think we're very well suited to help not only your clients and customers, but to help the industry as well.
100%. And for our listeners, this is also just auction is a disposition route for you that is available. Clearly, we're talking to Bidadoo today, so that's one of several, but you need to pick the one that works the best for you.
Correct.
And SOAR and Bidadoo are in agreement with that. Would Bidadoo love for them to be the one? Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And but in general, the reason why I wanted Larry on is because he has such a broad knowledge, and over the years, before Bidadoo even existed, these are just good used truck principles, right?
Correct.
Taking the inventory and starting to look at aging inventory. So start kind of talking a little bit more directly to that. So, okay, so I've got a group of trucks that's, I mean, I've seen dealerships, need to buy birthday cakes for trucks because they had them for 365 plus days. However, if you've got stronger control of your inventory, after about 90 days, I'm starting to look at that piece of equipment and starting to question what we're doing with it. All depends on your recon policies and some of that time. But after 90 days, you're starting to think about that. At 120 days, you need to be pulling the trigger on some kind of a relocation of that asset, so it's not on your books any longer. Is that true in your estimation?
100% correct, because you've always got to have a plan for that piece of equipment. Because again, that piece of equipment is not gonna get any better. You're subject to the economy, and the volatility of the economy, and as we all know, it can change on a dime for sure. Yeah. So when we anticipate, from a dealer standpoint, when we anticipate taking a piece of equipment, we need to have a plan relative to disposing it, because you're right. You drive on a lot and you go, where's that been?
Yeah.
How long has that been sitting here? Does it start? Do we have to take it to the shop? And then it's like fixing an old house. You just keep dumping. And what you really want is a plan to move on. And when you're probably 60 to 90 days out, well, technically, from the time you take it in to the time you put it on your lot, there is a time frame that is set by guidelines through Dealer 20, through OEM, and it shouldn't take any more than 10 to 15 days from the time you take it in to the time you put it on your lot.
Yep.
There also is a time where you look at both new and used, and you discuss turn ratios. How much money do you want to wrap up in these hard assets, and how fast do you want to turn them? So you have to really kind of keep your pulse on a lot of the inventory, and especially the used. The newer stuff, obviously, could go a little bit longer. The older stuff is 90 to 120 days. You're right. We're baking cakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No birthdays here. Don't fall in love. Right?
Don't fall in love.
Yep.
And because you even mentioned the word lot rot, it happens. Truck doesn't start. DPFs are clogged. Tires are flat. Now you're at $200 an hour. You have your journeyman going out there. Now you've got sunken costs that are continually going against that truck. In the meantime, you're using best practices by writing the truck down from a depreciation standpoint, so that you're not buried in these trucks.
Yeah, hopefully. And some of these dealerships don't have a write down policy, but that's a whole nother subject. But so, Larry, there's dealers out there listening, and they're like, yeah, well, that's great, guys, but I'm sitting on trucks. The market turned, not my fault. I've got these trucks now. How do I use the auction to help me get some new inventory on the lot? And how do I get out of this mess that I'm in without taking, the easy answer is, well, take them all, go put them on a non-reserve auction, wipe off your inventory and start over afresh, and then make better buying decisions for the market as it is today. Not always possible.
Not always possible.
That's a big check depending on where you're at in your inventory. So what does a dealer do? And how can they use in auction to do that? Or what's that look like?
Well, great question. And I believe there are certain things we can do. And again, we're changing the culture from auction to disposition or pre-owned. And again, we're an extension of the dealership. So when that situation comes up, there are several things we can do. Auction is probably one of the last things we'll take a look at, even from our standards. Because what we do is we not only, there are three ways really to dispose of equipment. You can retail it, you can wholesale it, you can auction it. And you have to look at all three and have a plan for all three. So as the aged inventory comes along, we can take a look. You provide us the information relative to year, make, model, utilizing the app, maybe shoot a couple of pictures, how many you have, what does it look like, so that we can do a fair evaluation on that piece of equipment. If it turns out that we agree, we can put it on what we call our marketplace. Now, will you get full retail for that? Maybe, maybe not. But you got to be prepared that it's going to sit on our marketplace where you basically name the price of where you want it to be. But we don't like to keep it up there long because the same situation happens within a dealership. The more they see it on a marketplace, the more they're going to pass by it month after month after month. They have to get realistic. And those are the things that we can help with, because we can take a look at, from our perspective, we can take a look at how many views is it getting. We kind of become an SEO for the dealership on equipment. So we can take a look at the views. We can take a look at has any offers come in. We can take a look at relative pricing within the market. There's a lot of different things that we can do before we maybe transition that piece now into an auction piece.
Yeah.
And we can develop that type of plan. Sometimes there are situations, and we just had one. We had a company on the West Coast that had 150 to 200 pieces of equipment that they were going to have to pay used inventory sales tax. And there are 9 or 10 states within the United States, no different than the car side of things, where if that inventory is sitting on your yard at the end of a fiscal year, you're going to have to pay a sales tax to the state. And in this case, it was well over $500,000. And unfortunately, that $500,000 has to go against those vehicles.
Yeah.
So instead of going against the vehicles, we made a decision along with them that we would purchase equipment, find the easiest route to go to dispose of, and help them through their bad situation.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate, but it was a bad situation. And again, they wanted to start out very, very clean in 2025. So my point in all that is there's several different ways that we can go to market. And it doesn't necessarily have to be auction.
Yeah. Putting my dealer hat on, I'm hearing there's some opportunity at the end of every year to call some of these 9 states and look for some inventory that they might want to move, because you might get some better
Absolutely.
prices. That might be a good takeaway for some listeners.
Absolutely. It's a real number. And
yeah,
it's going to hurt you for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, another thing that we'd talked about before is using an auction to, there's a couple ways, like I said, we can take that aged inventory, and even with a marketplace or something like that, you might be so upside down in that inventory at this point that you're like, yeah, that's great. I know I've marketed it. I've done everything. And the problem is I'm just too upside down in it to just sell it. So using the auction, something you and I have talked about is, so go out and find some inventory, maybe even find some on the auction, by the way. Go to the auction, find some inventory. That's another use case for, auctions. Dealers do it all the time. Right. Buy some inventory, or if you have some other opportunities, even if it's not exactly the same market. This is the other cool thing about having a great relationship with the auction is their audience isn't your audience. So if you buy inventory, let's say you're a sleeper truck buyer, and that's primarily what you sell, you can venture off into some of these other markets and not necessarily hit home runs on everything, but you can get some other inventory into your mix out of your market, right? Put it onto the auction if you're buying them right, and consult with the auction what they think before you buy. And
Absolutely.
And then so I'd be calling Larry and being, Larry, I've got a line on some box vans, and I'm a sleeper truck guy. What do you think these are worth? And then I want to buy them, and then I'm just going to flip them straight to the auction. And as I put them in the auction, all I'm looking for is to make enough money on those that I can get out of these sleeper trucks that I bought and maybe offset some of that loss. So even if it's, we've talked in the past about a 3-to-1 ratio. So if I buy 3 trucks and make profit on those, I can apply the profit on those 3 units to the trucks, the troubled equipment that I have, because I'm upside down in them, and I can take those funds and apply it towards those units. Maybe on paper, it doesn't look great on my books because it's like, oh, you didn't make any money this month. But you know what I did? I got rid of an asset, and I'm making room to get inventory that I can start to do better retail deals on. Is that does that fall in line with what you're seeing and have experienced and for dealers to do as practice?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Because you're going to have a stranded asset.
Yeah.
That you really are upside down on. And it's industry wide, and it's industry done all the time, where you may have a piece of equipment where you might make X amount of dollars, which is well over and above what you're in the piece of equipment for. However, you've got this old tired horse that's been sitting out there, and you know you're going to take a massive loss. So when you have that type of opportunity looking straight at you, where you've made some money, you're not starving for cash, you can take some of the proceeds, apply them against the old horse that's been sitting there, therefore drawing down your cost of disposing of that piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And let's just take, for example, great market, still doing very well, is the vocational side of this business. Sleepers right now, probably a lot of sleeper things. Don't know percentages, but we're seeing very heavy, the vocational space, especially as some of these new programs that have come into, let's just say basically, I don't want to say government programs, but rebuilding roads and some of the new infrastructure projects. Absolutely, 100%. So we're seeing a shift with a lot of dealers that are, what they're doing basically is changing up their mix a little bit. They're going waste, they're going vocational, they're going sleeper, and quite frankly, sometimes there are dealers where you're located within the country that you may never get into the sleeper market. I can tell you, for example, Seattle, Washington, perfect example. Totally different marketplace. Sleepers, probably non-existent. Dump trucks, heavily. Legal weight limits, 105.5. So their fleet mix, our fleet mix, was very different probably than, say, Mobile, Alabama, or Birmingham, Alabama, where that may be predominantly more of a sleeper market. So you've got to be very in tune to what your market is looking like.
If it's a dealer that doesn't normally and doesn't have a base, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but they don't have a customer base for a stake bed. How would they approach that? Would they go out and source some inventory that they're seeing somewhere, and then how do they kind of walk me through that on how they could successfully bring that to market?
Obviously, you get into the sales process and you find out what is the market lacking, what are you seeing more of, and do you have the right fleet mix? And then I think what you do is kind of like what you talked about is you test it. You don't go full bore. You go out and maybe you find nameplates with some of your fellow dealers, and you work with some of your fellow dealers, talk to them about it, and then maybe bring some of that equipment in, whether it be used, whether it be new, and start testing the market relative to what you think. So there's a lot of different angles you play on.
Yeah. So you talked about some hot markets. Can you just dig a little bit deeper on that? Anything else that you can give the listeners? Are heavy haul, any of that kind of stuff hot right now, or flatbeds?
Yep, absolutely. I would probably steer you to there. We all know that there's a housing shortage. You're seeing a lot of construction going on. You see a lot of building that's going on. We have several clients within our wheelhouse that do roofing material and with conveyors. You're seeing the vocational market stay very, very strong. And you mentioned probably something more near dear to my heart, which is heavy haul equipment. And heavy haul, what's nice about a heavy haul piece of equipment is it does not lose its value as fast as other equipment, because there's always a need. There's always a need for overweight vehicles. There's always a need for companies that have to move gigantic. I don't know, gigantic is probably not the right word, but they have to move
heavier loads.
Yeah. And so very good market niche to be in right now. So I would tell you, and I'd tell the audience as well, and especially the dealerships that are listening, very, very good market niche within the vocational space. And you have to go out and search for it. Anything that has a body, anything that has a dump bed, anything that may be maybe a 2-axle with a drop, a lot of different things at play here.
Yeah, that's right in line with what Chris and I talked about on our last podcast. We're talking about some of the natural disasters that are going on and things like that, which our heart goes out to those people. But
Absolutely.
There's also the other side of cleanup and rebuilding, and that's going to take trucks to do it, because everything you have was on a truck, right?
Absolutely, and it is, and I've always said this: it's a gauge on the economy, and I can't say enough, but if the economy is strong, trucks are running really, really well. So. Yeah. It's a nice indicator, let's put it that way, from a dealership standpoint.
Did you see any kind of a drop off in the last part of 2024 in auction activity?
To be honest with you, we didn't. And the reason we didn't was kind of going back to a previous conversation we just had, was a lot of customers had overpaid. And one of the areas that we saw, now we have two sides relative to our business. One is the machine side and one is the heavy duty truck side, along with agriculture and forestry. But the amount of repossession that we're getting back from the bank and it was mostly driven more towards the sleeper side. And I think that's where we went back to from the pandemic, where the pandemic levels, where people bought and overpaid, and unfortunately, freight rates dropped dramatically. And I think at the peak, if I remember correctly, they were roughly $5 a mile. And now I haven't looked at it recently, but I think it's relative back to where it was, which is about $1.47 a mile. So those individuals really got hurt from overpaying. And I think that's why you're seeing, for us, we saw the repo, we saw the bank lending institutions, what we saw a lot of them, and we're still seeing it right now. It's basically purging itself out. And so we're seeing a lot of comebacks. We saw a lot of fleet reduction relative to the need for trucks, where companies downsized in 2024. So we saw a lot of that happening. We still have a little bit of supply chain problem within the U.S. right now. I can tell you from the truck side, Allison transmissions right now are on allocation, and it's tough to get an automatic right now for a medium duty or a heavy. So we still have a little bit of that we're trying to catch up with.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to have that. You're going to have some of that.
Sure. And I think with the new emissions trucks coming out and all that, we're gonna see some hiccups and something. I mean, we always do. And supply chain, we're still in recovery mode from the pandemic for sure. And but all indications to me are 2025 is looking like it's going to be an up year. And are you seeing the same thing?
I think we're seeing the sentiment out there right now is very good. Even though we're here in January and February, I think our expectations and I think what we've seen and how we have recovered, I think you're seeing a lot of positivity out there, which is fantastic for our industry, and especially for our young professionals who've never gone through something like this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to create a great opportunity for the dealership. But you almost have to still go back to the basics, because nothing lasts forever. You don't want to get romantically involved. You almost have to be a steady Eddie as you're going through each one of these, let's just say it, revenue streams within a dealership, whether it's body shop, finance, new, used, parts, you name it. You got to stay pretty much steady, because that too then becomes more the norm and more the culture of the dealership, rather than chasing that shiny little object that's out there, So
that quick high and that deep low.
Yeah, absolutely, and it happens. Yeah, it happens to everybody.
Yep,
within a dealership.
We've all been there for sure, and
absolutely.
Watched it many times over the years, and for different reasons. I think the pandemic was one of the most dramatic, except for back in the early 2000s. I think was a fairly similar type anomaly in the industry, but that happens. So
well, and I think you touched on it too. I think we're still trying to figure our way around the new emissions. I mean, let's put it in perspective. California is a very, very large state, and a lot of these states are starting to adopt some of these. But we have seen just recently, and you probably could do a podcast for someone more well-versed than me to talk about what these regulations look like. So for I think we were at UTA, and I don't know if you were part of that conversation, where truck registrations in California, based on emissions, were down over 60%. I think Steve Tam at ACT gave that statistic. So a lot of changes happening within our industry. Where are they all going to fall out? Don't know. but I'd urge your dealerships to very much stay involved because it's also going to have an impact on how you dispose. We're getting a lot of good stuff right now that's not worn out, low miles, low hours coming out of the West Coast. And because of our reach through eBay, we're able to take that equipment, and that equipment that has to come out relative to emissions is good used equipment that's going to the Northeast, going to the Midwest, it's going into the South, where still has great life, longevity, and nice piece of equipment. So we're seeing a lot of different avenues within ours. We almost can look and see all the different things that are happening relative to the industry because of our reach and footprint, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. And the fact that you guys are so big on the equipment side, that plays really well into some of that vocational equipment, I'm sure.
Right.
Doesn't hurt to have the audience already there. So,
right, absolutely.
And the power of eBay, can't be understated. They've been a great partner for us, and I think a great partner for you guys as well. So,
absolutely.
Well, with that, Larry, I'd like to thank you for being on today, and really appreciate your insight, and hope to have you back on the show again sometime in the future.
Well, I appreciate it as well. I hope I'm invited back. But sure. As you and I talk, it's always a pleasure to catch up. It's always a pleasure to discuss. And unfortunately, we do go down a few rabbit holes. So
yeah, I think we stayed pretty good on task.
Wait, I think we did too. I mean, it can get pretty crazy for someone who's not in the business to listen to us, and they, tinfoil hats and all that stuff. You never know.
Well, Larry, again, I appreciate you, and thanks for being on. And for our audience, thank you for listening, and hope that you got something out of this podcast today to get your inventory off the lot and over the curb.
Thank you very much.